He was the man who made one of the most controversial decisions in world history. The quiet vice president who suddenly found himself leading a nation at war. And the president who helped reshape the modern world order. Welcome to Wise Rulers, where we dive deep into the legacies of leaders who shaped nations. Today, we explore the extraordinary life and leadership of Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States. Born on May 8, 1884, in Lamar, Missouri, Harry S. Truman grew up in the small town of Independence. He had poor eyesight and couldn't afford college, but Truman's perseverance would become the hallmark of his life. During World War I, he served with distinction as a captain in the field artillery in France. Upon returning, he opened a haberdashery, a men's clothing store, in Kansas City, which eventually failed during the post-war recession. But Truman's political journey had only just begun. In 1922, Truman entered politics as a Jackson County judge, essentially a county commissioner. By 1934, backed by the powerful Pendergast political machine, Truman won election to the U.S. Senate representing Missouri. At first dismissed as an unremarkable senator, Truman proved his mettle during World War II, chairing the Truman Committee, which investigated military spending. His work saved billions of taxpayer dollars and made him a national figure. In 1944, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, running for a fourth term, selected Truman as his vice president. Truman served just 82 days before Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945, and Truman was suddenly thrust into the presidency. The world was still at war, and Truman had no time to ease into the role. Just hours after taking the oath, he was told about the Manhattan Project, the U.S. effort to develop nuclear weapons. In August 1945, Truman made the most consequential decision of his presidency, to use atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings led to Japan's surrender and the end of World War II, but the ethics of that choice continue to be debated to this day. Truman's presidency didn't end with the war. In many ways, it was just beginning. With Europe in ruins and communism on the rise, Truman championed the Marshall Plan, investing billions to rebuild Western Europe and stop Soviet influence. He introduced the Truman Doctrine, a bold pledge to support nations resisting communism, and laid the foundation for the Cold War. In 1949, he helped form NATO, a military alliance that still exists today. Truman staunchly rejected isolationism, insisting that America had a duty to lead the post-war world. Domestically, Truman tried to continue Roosevelt's New Deal legacy with what he called the Fair Deal, a series of liberal reforms for healthcare, housing, education, and civil rights. But he faced a conservative-dominated Congress, and many of his proposals failed. However, in 1948, he issued Executive Orders 9980 and 9981, which desegregated the federal government and the U.S. Armed Forces, a major civil rights milestone, years before the 1960s movement gained momentum. Truman's foreign policy was tested again in 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea. Truman committed U.S. forces under the United Nations banner, beginning the Korean War. The war saw bloody stalemates and political controversy, especially after Truman fired General Douglas MacArthur. On the home front, he faced rising inflation, labor strikes, and increasing political opposition. Despite a divided Democratic Party and bleak polls, Truman ran for re-election in 1948, and shocked the nation by defeating Republican Thomas E. Dewey in one of the most famous upsets in U.S. history. The iconic newspaper headline, "Dewey defeats Truman," would live on in political folklore. As his second term ended, allegations of corruption within his administration surfaced, although Truman himself was never personally implicated. He chose not to run in 1952, and retired to Independence, Missouri. Though once believed to be financially struggling, later records revealed Truman had built considerable wealth, partly during his presidency. In retirement, he founded the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and published his memoirs. When Truman left office, he was deeply unpopular. His approval ratings were among the lowest in U.S. presidential history. But over time, historians reassessed his presidency. Today, Truman is often ranked among the top U.S. presidents, admired for his decisiveness, leadership during crisis, and principled stands, especially on civil rights and foreign policy. He died on December 26, 1972, at the age of 88. Harry S. Truman wasn't born into power. He wasn't a war hero or a celebrity. He was a citizen president, an ordinary man faced with extraordinary moments. He once said, "The buck stops here." And throughout his presidency, he lived by that phrase. What do you think of Truman's legacy? Was he a wise ruler, a wartime pragmatist, or both? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Wise Rulers, and share this video to help us keep history alive.